Battletech Gothic, or that time that CGL tried to rip off the 40k aesthetic to steal 40k customers. So, CGL is putting out some alternate universe content, the first of which is Battletech Gothic, which basically takes Battletech and changes a couple of names and adds in giant horrible science experiments like big cows with cannons on their heads. And the community has had a pretty mixed response. Some people are like, well, you know, it's fine, and others are like, this is not my Battletech, what are you doing? Why are you creating this when you haven't put out whatever Clan thing that you were supposed to be working on? Honestly, guys, this is just not that big of a deal. This is the product lineup that we have for the initial release. We have, as you can see, a weird Tyrannosaurus thing with missile pods strapped to it. So apparently these are abominations. There's some kind of genetically altered monsters that humanity is using in lieu of battle mechs, which seems kind of weird to me. Like, why wouldn't you just use battle mechs if you already have battle mechs? They're more easily controlled. Like, these are not gonna be a good idea. You're gonna unleash a giant monster in a city to go and fight against enemy battle mechs. It's gonna just destroy all the buildings and probably eat some people along the way. I mean, how do these things even work? These are like 2-story tall monsters. They've gotta have massive appetites. And I don't know if I'm like a huge fan of the aesthetics of these minis either. They just kind of got that like Chaos Space Marine spiky shoulder bits vibe. Although the Doug Dimmadome Atlas hat looks pretty hilarious. This just looks so goofy and weird. Like, why are they trying to rip off the 40k aesthetic? I mean, I can tell you why. It's because a lot of 40k players are coming over to Battletech and they want to capitalize on that and say, hey, look, we've got big spiky robots too. It just seems like kind of a silly, cheap cash-in attempt at capturing a little bit more of that 40k market share. Although I'll tell you what, I mean, this looks like a really cool and optimized Phoenix Hawk. I would definitely run this mech. SRM6, it's got a sword, it's got 4 medium lasers. I mean, it's a very optimized jump behind you and blast you with lots of lasers kind of mech. Like, this is probably one of the most optimized Phoenix Hawks I've ever seen. And then you can see over here we've got some sort of stat line things for more abominations. So I see at least 5 here, one of them being a troll king. That's pretty interesting. And they've renamed the inner sphere to the human sphere, and they're using that like weird gothic text. Honestly, here's what I think they should have done instead of what they're doing. It seems like everyone has these weird sort of gothic alternate looks to their mechs, but instead of that, I would have loved to have seen like just Comstar having like very religious themes, or maybe instead of going with mutant abominations, instead we have demons, and there's like actual demons invading the inner sphere, and we add a little bit of actual magic. I mean, they're making an alternate universe, but they're still keeping to the quote-unquote hard sci-fi that Battletech has. And I mean, as a Battletech fan, I can definitely tell you that Battletech is not hard sci-fi. These don't work. I'm just gonna tell you right now, if you want hard sci-fi, mechs are not a thing. The only place that mechs would be a thing is in space, which is why Gundam actually makes a little bit of sense, because being able to like cling to the outside of a spaceship and rip it apart with your hands, or work in space with like actual tactile hands that are able to grip things, makes a lot of sense from like a construction standpoint. But there's no reason why you would ever use battle mechs over just really large vehicles like tanks, because this is harder to build, it's harder to armor, and it's harder to fit into a ship and transport around. Plus, they're like 2 stories tall. They make for massive profile targets. And I don't even want to get into what would happen when a dropship actually tries to land on a planet. These things would literally knock down a city like a mile away with the amount of thrust that they would have to produce in order to come down and make a soft landing rather than crashing into the planet. But regardless of all of that, if you're gonna do an alternate universe and you're gonna rip off 40k, why wouldn't you just go whole hog on it? Have demons invade, have some kind of like crazy cultists discover something, maybe an offshoot of Comstar. That would be really cool. They took Comstar out of the lore completely. Maybe this would be a way to please all the Comstar fanboys. Bring Comstar back in a big way in an alternate universe and have them, you know, unite the inner sphere against their offshoot cultists that are literally worshipping demons from like deep space, or like some kind of crazy aliens. Like, there's so many ways that they could have gone rather than just having weird biomorph biomorph monsters. They could have gone more into fantasy. They could have had aliens invade the inner sphere. Like, instead of the clans, have aliens with big biomorph monsters attack. That would be pretty freaking cool. That would be like Pacific Rim kind of stuff. Now, we are supposed to be getting 2 alternate universes, another 2 after this. One is apparently anime inspired, which is fitting considering that most of the older mechs are inspired by anime, if not having their designs ripped wholly out of anime like Macross or Dougram. So this author here is talking about how he really loves what if alternate universes, and apparently Catalyst asked him to try his hand at a box set sized what if alternate universe for Battletech. This is what he came up with? Really? Like, we're gonna have a little bit of influence from 40k in just aesthetics and nothing else, and it's pretty much just Battletech except with weird mutant monsters that are going to be fighting against battle mechs. I mean, this just seems kind of lazy and not very well thought out. I'm not going to really interact with it. I'm more excited for the anime design aesthetics. Maybe we'll get some reworked melee rules or something like that, where mechs can actually do some of that crazy Gundam stuff that we see in animes. Then again, a lot of grognards when it comes to Battletech seem to really hate the Gundam aesthetic and how their mechs are so, like, quote-unquote unrealistic when mechs are already super unrealistic. I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I grew up on Gundam, though, and only discovered Battletech quite a bit later. I mean, I played MechWarrior when I was a kid, but it's only within maybe the past 5 years that I discovered Battletech through the PC game. So maybe I'm biased. I've always wanted to see a cool Gundam tabletop game. I know that they technically exist. There's, like, fan games and stuff like that, but so far from what I've seen, Battletech is the only really granular game with, you know, different locations and being able to lose different weapons and having to worry about heating and stuff like that, which is kind of crazy. I mean, this game's been around for 40 years and it basically perfected the formula already back then, which kind of brings me to my last point. Like, if you don't want to engage with this because you've been a long-time fan of Battletech, I mean, you can still just play whatever you want with Battletech. Play Battletech however you want, just like it's always been. I'm a firm believer in using bottle caps on the tabletop with mech designations written on them, so I don't understand all the flack that people are giving CGL about this. I think that if this does well, we might see some cooler alternate universes, and that might be very interesting, because one thing that I've always wanted to see is Battletech sort of combined with Shadowrun. Like, what if Shadowrun universe was in 3025 and we had, like, magic and stuff, and maybe we're fighting against the weird existential dread monsters that are supposed to be coming from alternate universes in Shadowrun because of the awakening of magic. And now it's 100 years in the future from where we were in Shadowrun before, and not only do we have crazy magicians, but we've got guys running around in giant battle mechs, maybe with, like, cybernetic enhancements like we've got in some of the Battletech cybernetically enhanced pilots. I mean, I think that would be a pretty cool universe to explore and maybe run an RPG in. And that would be a heck of a lot even more grimdark than this would be. I mean, with grimdark, you need to have some kind of big existential dread plot that is threatening to destroy all of humanity all the time, whether it's Tyranids or the forces of chaos. We don't really have that in this, so they're trying to do grimdark without the necessary parts of a grimdark universe. They're just kind of taking a little bit of the aesthetic of weird gothic stuff and sticking it on battle mechs. Anyways, that's my thoughts on this. I just wanted to address it because a couple of people in stream were asking me about it. Check out the live section on my channel. Lots of cool stuff on there. I've been playing a heck of a lot of games lately. There's probably something there for you if you're into tactical RPGs and tabletop games like I am. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.
Hey everyone, Mechadome here, owner of the Mechdale Mechadome. Solaris 7 got burnt down by Abominations, so I built the ultimate Mechadome for your entertainment. Come on down for amazing mech combat. Kids get in free Tuesdays.
Mechadome! Be there or you're a loser!